Chapter 8. A Battle of Spells. Val quickly took his position where he would be hidden once the door was opened, as Dirk used him as a stepping stone and spread himself above the door. Suspended between the walls of the hall, Dirk anchored his hands and feet to the stone, making him one with the ceiling. Just as Dirk had stated, muffled sounds could now be heard, confirming the approach of more than one unknown figure. The door swung open and none other than Captain West himself walked in, only this time, he walked unaided by a cane. 2 soldiers accompanied West, and a man dressed in a black silk robe trailed close behind. The robe was adorned with runes that ran across the borders, blood red in color. Val glanced upward towards his brother Dirk, catching the emotion he displayed. Something was definitely upsetting him from the rage that clouded his face, rage that boiled forth from the depths of his soul. It was clear to Val that it was taking every ounce of energy he could muster to keep himself restrained. A couple steps in and the men stopped dead in their tracks. The captain made a quick motion with his fist in the air, halting his men in their tracks. He drew his sword just in time to catch the reflection of Dirk's throwing daggers flying directly at him. His sword came in contact with the projectiles, defying their intended course. As Dirk dropped from the ceiling, the cloaked man raised his hands, his runes glowing as he spoke in some sort of ancient language. Dirk hit the ground running, his heading straight for West, who in turn ran past his cloaked companion, straight for the elf. Val knew what they were up against. He recognized the ancient language of magic. Expecting the first spell to close off their exit, he readied an arrow and his bow. The confined space he was hidden in didn't permit much room to maneuver. All I have to do is hit something besides Dirk, he thought to himself. Completing his spell, the door slammed shut, allowing Val to draw his bow and fire past Dirk. The arrow sailed down the hall, digging into one of the soldiers that was readying his sword for battle. A second spell was quick to escape the mage in a frantic haste, sending it towards the elven brute. With a blast of hot air, Dirk flew back half a step, only slowed, and greatly irritated by the attack. He took the time he lost to draw his battle bow, planting the sharpened knife-like end into the other remaining soldier nearest to him. The man went down without even time to scream. "Sorcerer, you better not let me down again." West growled as he slammed his sword into Dirk's bow. The weapons cried out in protest as they pushed together. "Nothing but death awaits you here, elf. You're not fooling anyone by shaving your head." Dirk almost lost his balance as his attention shifted to his hairless head. He quickly pulled his thoughts back to the battle at hand. "It's not like I asked for the haircut, it just came to me." The battle between Dirk and West pushed further down the hall, deeper into the castle. The mage seemingly prepared another spell, though his target was unknown. It almost seemed he was concentrating on himself. Val was forced to advance towards the other guard, who seemed to be putting himself between the 2 combatants and Val on purpose. And Val was just dying to get into combat. 2 more arrows flew through the air in quick succession, both of them finding their mark. Fighting past the chainmail, one of them found enough space in between the plates of armor to taste flesh. The impact alone stopped the second soldier, causing him to spin in his tracks. As Dirk was battling with his current nemesis, he was unaware of the sword that leapt from the topsy-turvy guard. In the sword's chaotic arc, it sliced into his shoulder, causing a 3-inch gash across his deltoid muscle. West had a favorable view of the sword's trajectory and used his training and quick thinking to put Dirk in the way of the sailing weapon as much as possible. He found himself slightly disappointed that more damage had not been caused. His years of training didn't prepare him for what happened next. When the sword struck Dirk, an odd sensation ran through his body. West was moving to his injured side to take advantage of his new condition, but rather than blood, it was instead fire that erupted from the wound. Not waiting for what was to happen next, Dirk took full advantage of the captain, who was left flabbergasted. putting as much force and velocity into his fist as he could muster, aiming right for West's noggin. The foundation of West's world shook like nothing he'd ever experienced before. In slow motion you would swear his whole head was dislocated from its origin, but in real time his jaw had been shattered and heavily dislocated, jarring it free from the home God gave it. West was seeing nothing but stars at the moment of impact, spiraling in a slow descent as the impact proceeded to remove his wits and bring on a pain usually received from having one's jaw shattered. The flames that shot from the wound dispersed as quickly as they had started, leaving behind not even a scar, no scar tissue of any sort. Val would have fired off a third arrow, but a thick gooey substance covered the bow, leaving it disabled and useless. Once the archer was disabled, the mage turned his attention on the elven behemoth that was towering over his captain. There wasn't enough time to call forth a full-strength spell, so a quick one would have to suffice. Raising his slender and bony hands into the air, pointing them at Dirk's back, lightning shot from the tips of his fingers, striking with relentless punishment. Dirk struggled to stay on his feet, only to find every muscle in his body clenched and constricted from the electrocution. Val reached for his sword, knowing he had to do something to free Dirk from his electric confinement. With one hard swing of his arm, the sword sailed through the air. His aim was good and true, straight for the mage's back, only to stop short of his robe, the air shimmering from the impact as the sword clattered uselessly to the ground. The attack was not in vain. The concentration of the mage wavered for just a moment. A moment was just enough time for Dirk to take off in a full sprint, commanding his body to respond to his will. Practically falling over himself as he regained his motor control, he bolted towards Val. Dirk moved like a freight train barreling towards the door, his pace increased with every step. All that stood in front of him now was his brother and the spellbound door itself. Val looked at the door and then back at the elf, which at this time was passing him by. "Move your ass, Val," Dirk yelled, smacking him lightly on the back of his head, not slowing his pace for even a moment. Val didn't bother waiting for an explanation. Besides, there was a mage who already had a barrier erected, and West was now getting back to his feet. West waved a shaking fist as he cradled his screaming, dislocated jaw with his other. "Okay, let's recap for a moment here. We have 2 guards down, Captain West injured but still in action, and madder than a cat's tail hurled into a freezing cold pool of water. Our battle mage has a strong barrier that looks to be able to deflect physical attacks. Val has dropped his bow, a weapon made useless by one of the mage's spells. His sword is lying at the feet of none other than the mage himself. Val, trailing in the wake of Dirk, who was heading straight for that magically sealed door. Now all this was happening in a very short amount of time. The haul can't be that long after all, so what in Sam Hill is going on in Dirk's mind? "Here it comes," Dirk bellowed out. "What's about to happen?" Val questioned, his senses sharpening instinctively. As his awareness heightened, he could feel the pressure building in the room, his lungs constricting under the weight, his skin starting to perspire from the sudden change, the sudden increase in temperature. Instantly, he knew what to expect. Dirk was already starting to make a zigzagged path, so Val followed suit, the 2 in perpendicular paths. Explosions detonated just behind them as they ran into the closed door, and when I say ran into, I mean Dirk slammed into the door full force. You could hear what sounded like bones cracking. His body slowly slumped down. Val forced himself to a skidding halt, just coming short of crashing into Dirk. With one hand on his brother, Val waited for a good 3-second count. Then, just as he felt the hairs on the back of his neck starting to singe, he hurled himself and his brother to the side. This time the explosion landed square on the spot they had just been standing. The door sailed into the courtyard, sent on its trajectory, straight into a large crowd of unsuspecting onlookers. The explosion was almost deafening as a smoke plume came from the door. Dirk stood up, his back scorched right through his lab coat, revealing the skin slowly mending itself as fire seemed to remain, consuming the wound as if it was burning backwards. Val stood up from under Dirk, wondering just how his brother had got on top of him, shielding his body from the explosion. "I thought you." "Yeah, don't mention it, no time," Dirk replied. Ringing in the ear aside, Val was surprised their trick had worked. Dirk must have weakened the spell that bound the door in its place just enough for the attack to finish the door off. West burst through the smoke and into the courtyard, the aged mage on his heel. The captain started to yell, but his jaw just flopped in a blood-wrenching protest. A young soldier was quick to come to his aid. Trepidation painted his face as he came to stand at attention in front of the officer. "Sir, I see that you've been inflicted with injury from the explosion. Is there anything Private Johanst can do for the captain?" The young private stood like a stone statue, unwavering as he waited for orders. "Private," the mage addressed the apprehensive soldier, "Captain West has been brutally assaulted by 2 escaped prisoners. They escaped through that door just moments ago." He gestured towards the opening that was still bellowing smoke with an unrelenting obsession. "It's of the utmost importance that the 2 be apprehended immediately." "Sir, consider the men on high alert, sir." With a quick salute, the young soldier hurried off in the direction of another commanding officer. West scanned the field of soldiers. A small outfit of medics could be seen tending the victims from the door that had been thrown into the crowd, but he was looking for some indication as to where Val and Dirk had escaped to. It seemed that most of the men were admiring the smoke cloud when he turned and noticed something amiss. "Hey Dirk, how long do you think it will be before they notice us?" Val asked curiously. "The wind just changed. It won't be long till this cloud no longer hides us."